Call the meeting November 18th of the Affordable Housing Trust to order. We have some remote participation, so we're going to roll call everybody in. We'll start with members here.
Swenson here.
Often here.
Spinning here.
Kusher here.
And then Lakeisha
Here.
at Mr. Prisby.
Here.
Brittany.
Here.
All right. We are all here. So we have a full complement, a full trust now, 7 members. Lakeisha was appointed a couple weeks ago, got sworn in on the 9th. And Lakeisha, why don't you just introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll go around the rest of the room and introduce ourselves. I know you heard everybody during the roll call, but just to be a little bit more nice.
So my name is Lakeisha Carpenter Papasakis. You can say Lakeisha Carpenter because I know Papasakis is a tongue full for most. Let's say I've been a resident of Grafton for almost 3 years, maybe over 3 years. I have 3 kids that attend Grafton public schools and one that attends private school in Wichita.
And Lakeisha, I was following some of the appointment process. You've served on a trust in a different capacity or in a different community, rather?
Yeah, I served on a trust in Longmeadow, East Longmeadow,
Great.
in Western Mass.
Nice.
Prior.
Terrific.
So yes, I'm familiar with town structure that's very similar to Grafton. If you know anything about Longmeadow and East Longmeadow, western part of the state, they are, the suburban city of or town of Springfield, which actually they have very similar demographics or their demographics kind of changed a lot like Grafton's did, from kind of like a farm town that was the outskirts of the city to more of a suburban family town environment, much as Grafton has done in the last 10 years.
Brilliant. Thank you. Eric, introduce yourself real quick.
Yep. Hey, Lakeisha and Brittany, nice to meet you. Eric Swenson. I have been on the trust for, I think, 1.5 years. I'd have to actually look that up. But I've been on economic development and finance committee as well. I've lived in Grafton for about 4 years, so I'm on the newer side, I guess, just like you. And really looking forward to having the full board together and get going on some of these projects. Or full trust, I guess.
Matt Often, I have met both of you. I'm the select board rep on the Affordable Housing Trust. I've been on for, 6 months or so. So I'm fairly new to the trust, but looking forward to working with both of you.
Matt is also the current treasurer.
True, it's not an official position,
So
but I can pay bills now.
when everybody gets their
Trust bills.
everybody would get their ATM cards in the mail. We figure it all out. Dan, please.
I'm Dan Kusher. I've been on the trust probably I think a week or 2 longer than Eric, and I'm a software engineer. I'm on the finance committee as well, and yeah, just excited to move forward with some projects that are gonna have a good impact for affordable housing in town.
Brittany?
Hi, Lakeisha. I'm Brittany. Lived in Grafton for probably 2 years now, almost 2 years now. So new like you. I am a registered trained architect. I've done affordable housing in my past firm for about 5 years. Built a lot of things in Dorchester, Roxbury, Boston area. This is my second meeting, so I'm new like you.
Mr. Prisby?
Hi, Lakeisha. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for joining up. My name is Ed Prisby. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I've been off and on this trust since 2012. So, thanks for joining.
And I'm Bruce Spinney. I've been on the trust again off and on for a while. I've been doing municipal government for some time. I do have some development backgrounds, and I think I've been acting as the chair for a couple of years now, or maybe less than a year. I don't know. Time. I stopped paying attention after about 6 months of doing stuff like this. So, not on the actual work itself, but on cataloging how long I've lived in town and things like that. I think it's very important that we have a full complement. We're in a fortunate position where the town actually gave us a piece of property to use, and we also have a couple $1 million of reserve cash in the bank, which has been sitting there for some time, and that we have projects to deploy it on. And I think it provides me with a much greater sense of confidence and comfort that we're going to have a sustainable trust. So 7 members, you can evenly distribute work and decision making capacity, and of course influx of ideas and things of that nature is always beneficial. But the trust as it stands now should have a good 8 months of us, and then a couple of us will be rolling off, or perhaps just me, and then the rest of you are going to have another year after that, which is good. So there's good continuity now, and we can start really kind of building something. The first item we have tonight is just kind of like a 25 Worcester Street update. There's nothing really new to catalog. We had some feedback, of course, as we had our last meeting, which was Brittany's first awakening of municipal fire. And it's much lighter tonight, and I think that revolved around the warrant article to remove the restriction. So that was tabled. We'll take it back up again in the spring. But I did mention at that last meeting that we want to make sure this stays on the agenda, and as new thoughts and new ideas and new concepts come in, we make sure we distribute that amongst the trust members. And see if there's other things we can, or other approaches we can take on the property. So I know you got some information, Brittany got some information as well, on just kind of background and history a little bit, but now's the time for questions if you have any on that particular project.
Did we ever go to, I think I had suggested going to Worcester County to pull the deeds there?
I think you're thinking of the Hudson Ave property.
Oh, maybe it was,
Yeah, it's a different
okay.
one.
Yeah, the 25 Worcester Street is that was conveyed to the trust by town meeting action, and then as an attachment and of course a deed restriction to it was the language of the warrant article that was used to convey it. So 55 restriction. There's some other verbiage in there as well, and that's kind of what we were looking at, the change to broaden it. So but we kind of set that aside, and we're going to pick it back up again at a later date. But for the time being, we had some concept work done, very preliminary, just to kind of give the trust an idea of some of the things that can get accomplished there. I believe we sent those to you, but if not,
Yeah, I think I saw
we'll
those.
get them to you.
The potential plans of the, I think it was like 3 stories or something. I did see it.
There was
I
a
did
few
get it.
different things, yeah. And then there was
Yeah.
some other options that we had discussed, and we never really fully committed to taking it to the next layer where we would start to hone in on what we actually wanted to see. Now, I know, Brittany, you mentioned last time that you were going to look at some other options on the nonprofit side. I don't know if you've had any success with bringing anything to us tonight. If not, make sure you get them to me, and then we can give you a little bit more time. But if you could, just give us a brief update if you've gotten any further on that.
Yeah, I reached out to a couple that I've worked with in Boston. They weren't familiar with any in the Worcester area, but I actually found through some colleagues Housing Forward, which I've just been initial contact with. They do a lot of data-based information on housing and kind of how to do a little bit better of a public outreach to inform people of why 40B is a thing and density's not so bad, things like that. So I just had initial emails back and forth with them, and I just wanted to get the sign off from everybody else to keep moving forward with them, maybe have them come to a meeting and do a little bit of strategy for public outreach. So I don't know if you guys are all open to that. And I can send you all their web page so you can do a little bit more digging in yourself. but they seemed like a good resource to have, and they would probably have some nonprofits also, I'm hoping, in the area. But my father-in-law, he also was on. He's lived in Shrewsbury, and he was working with the trust there years back. And they're both my in-laws are in public service. They do social work, so they are familiar with some housing group homes and things like that, nonprofits that they work with. So I was hoping to get some contacts from them. If everyone's on board with that, I can start going through those avenues. I'm still not privy to if I'm allowed to do emails by myself or how much has to be public. So just wanted to get the sign off there.
Yeah, so, when you're emailing, and if you email the entire trusts, I mean, it's considered that you're in a quorum. You might as well just send it directly to either Chris or myself, and then we can put it together in the packet for you.
Okay.
You don't really have to do that, but everybody kind of plays it safe when they're talking about OML. What you're really not allowed to do is deliberate outside of the meeting space or a public meeting space. So
Gotcha.
if you're sending it to everybody, as long as everybody's not talking back and forth about it and coming to a decision on a particular matter, that's what you want to avoid. So if you're anywhere close to that, or if you're worried about it at all, just send it to Chris. Chris will send it to everybody. And then I make a habit of letting everybody know, when I'm planning to start the agenda. So I believe everybody should have gotten an email, and they usually get one about a week ahead of when we need to post. So if you have anything that you want to see on the agenda, no matter how simple or how plain, just send it to me so I can park it there. So at the very least, if it's something that we want to have a productive conversation about, we can.
Okay.
So I would say just move forward with whatever you find. We're not going to inhibit anybody's ideas amongst the trust. So you never know what you're going to glean, and you never know what's going to, somebody's going to bite at. So it's good to have a
Yeah.
nice open discussion. Go ahead.
So I'll just add with like those kinds of rules about like emailing and deliberating and stuff. It's funny because they make us take this the conflict of interest law training, but they don't make us take an open meeting law training. But there is one available. So I can find that link and pass it along to you if you'd like. That might help kind of clear up some of the ambiguity with that.
You can
Yeah,
send that
that'd
to
be
me
great.
too.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'd like that one too. Thanks.
Yeah. I only have training on AIA contracts, so I don't know much about this kind of stuff, but yeah, that'd be helpful.
Does anybody else have anything that they want to update on 25 Worcester Street, no matter how mundane, or even if it's something like what we want to see happen, as far as it being an agenda item or things of that nature?
So
I did have an idea. I don't know. This probably won't be at this stage, but once we get a little bit farther down, we've had success in previous projects with public outreach doing charrettes, having community members come in and we kind of set up different exercises for them to feel like they're heard. Like, okay, do you want to see a pitched roof? Do you want to see a flat roof? Simple things like that won't really affect the cost as much, but just making people feel a little bit more heard, and it seems to go smoother process. I don't know if you guys have done anything like that before, since we haven't.
Have there been any surveys? Like, have there been town surveys on what the town wants to see in terms of affordable housing, in terms of what the town wants? Have we done any surveys like that?
We haven't done anything intertrust wise. So as it's not an actual town project, it's a trust project.
Mm-hmm.
There's a layer of complexity there because it's our land. We decide what we want to do with it. So when we were going through the first initial phases of this, we didn't really have a full complement of a trust. We're actually just now at the point where we haven't had a lot of turnover. So what I wanted to make sure is that everybody who gets on the trust sees everything that they can do with the property, with the mission in mind of creating as much affordable housing as we can, and reach as many people as we can with that housing. So we haven't come to the point where we made a decision on what we want to see. So once you get to that point, we still have to go through all the public permitting processes. So we'll still go
Right.
to ZBA, we'll still go through the normal lip functions and things of that nature, which typically have very arduous, public hearing process where they actually go through the project and how it looks and what's going to happen. And of course, before that, we need to make the decision of how we want to approach, whatever it is we actually are doing. And then I think we can go from there and say, some architectural review, some, what do we want to see? How is it going to be shaped? Do we want what type of siding? Things of that nature as you can kind of drill down. The problem I have, and we've run into before with, outreach first is, you typically don't get a wide variety of the town, the cross section of the town. You typically get people in that particular neighborhood. And I wanted to approach it, and how I was trying to guide the trust to approach it is make sure we have our eyes wide open on what we can get accomplished, and then hone it in as we, meet feedback and resistance and things of that nature. So we've never really come up with a project or an idea that has been worthy of sitting down with a bunch of people in the audience and kind of picking through it. If that approach
And how have we-
changes, of course,
Sorry.
everything can change. Tell me.
How have we compiled in terms of what we felt was the needs for the town? I mean, has that come about? And two, if it has come about, how did we decipher that?
So yeah, Chris, if you'd like to, sure.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the broader, not specifically to this parcel, but in terms of broader townwide goals, we do have the 2018 housing production plan, and that does include a lot of public engagement and charrettes, like we're talking about in the broader sense, and that identifies the goals. It looks at not just data collection, but also the public participation in shaping the path towards generating affordable housing in Grafton. Part of that housing production plan actually identified this parcel, which is kind of the impetus for the town meeting and the trust pursuing development of this parcel for affordable housing. So that's kind of the background from that. So.
I know I spoke for a while. Matt, you had something?
Yeah, I just had an idea around Springtown meeting. So one of the things that I heard in our last meeting was some concern about if we just removed the restriction altogether, that the housing trust could basically do whatever it wanted to do with the property. And so my thinking in hearing that was, could we pursue a path of, instead of removing the restriction altogether, changing it to be a little bit more specific about what it is that we intend to do with this property, which at this point, if the trust decides that it really wants to pursue SHI, maybe we just ask the town to change the restriction to be dedicated just to affordable housing, but without the 55 plus restriction, so that it just kind of removes that whole line of discussion about, well, they can do anything they want with it. And we can kind of signal to the town what it is that we actually want to do, which is more general affordable housing, not necessarily age restricted. So I just wanted to bring that up as a potential way forward.
Okay.
To be able to work towards SHI and also affordable housing on this particular parcel.
So another thing is the Eric, I'm sorry, I'll let you go to as well. When we approach this and we're looking at what we want to do with it, we need to make a decision as a trust. Is do we want to put some time and energy into coming up with an actual plan, something that we could go out with an RFP for, and see what type of feedback we get. That takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a little bit of money to get those things together. And then go back to town meeting and say, well, this is what we really wanted to do with it. Or is our approach, now that we have a couple new members here, to say, well, no, we're going to keep it the way the town wants to do it. We don't want to go back to town meeting and change anything. Let's work within the sandbox. We can have those discussions. I don't necessarily want to have those tonight, but I want to make sure that everybody on the trust has equal opportunity to present different avenues, and not think that the avenue that we're particularly on is the one that we're dedicated and have to take. What I want to make sure, and what I've been trying to do, is make sure everybody has enough information, because we're not all experts on this, and most of us don't have a lot of experience in the town or a lot of experience developing or what have you. So you can't really make that broad range of decisions, which might be the highest and best use for the place. So I still think we should spend a little bit of time on 25 Worcester Street, making sure we understand the capabilities we have and the potential for the site. So keep information coming in, no matter how mundane the idea is. Ed, did you have anything before we move on to GSX?
Yeah. I hear everybody, and what I want to do is I want to learn from, I think, how the last 8 weeks have gone with regard to 25 Worcester Street. I think the problem is right now we've got a land that the town gave to us for a specific purpose. And before we go back at any town meeting and decide that that use should change in some way for some reason, I think we owe it to everybody to figure out why that needs to change. And I, still haven't really heard a convincing articulation of an argument that the deed restriction absolutely has to come off. Well, I've heard two reasons. I've heard the first reason I've heard is because there's an SHI concern, but we haven't really pursued that with DHCD. Like, I don't think we really know that. Number two, I've heard that, well, it's awfully hard to get a developer. Okay, but I haven't heard a developer talk to me about cost and what it would cost to construct something like that, fill it with 55 plus residents, and then talk to us about what our end of subsidizing this project would be. So for me, I think you got to do that homework first and that due diligence. Once that's done, okay, I have no problem going back and making the argument, listen, we tried. This was a good idea at the time, but we couldn't make it work. So if you really do support affordable housing, just remove the 55 plus restriction, and we'll have all ages affordable housing, and we can talk about what that would look like, and the reasons why that might work, and the reasons why it wouldn't. But I'm very there's a step here, like steps 1, 2, 3, and right now, and I'll tell you, Lakeisha, and you as well, Brittany, the problem with this trust has always been, we're very good at talking about affordable housing. We're very good at putting stuff on an agenda, and we're very good at identifying what we think the issues are. We're just really bad at actually building affordable housing. We haven't done this before. Like there is no actual affordable housing project that the Affordable Housing Trust has completed since 2007. And and when I get myself in these positions where, in my career, where I don't know what the next step is, I go and I ask somebody who's done it before, what do you do here? What is the next step on this particular project? And there are people that we can talk to about this. Massachusetts Housing Partnership has a lot of resources. Brittany identified Housing Forward, who I'm sure has other people that they've worked with before who have done things like this. So it seems like a little bit of networking and a little bit of talking to people could start answering these questions for us. Because the last thing I kind of want to do is I do, nobody loves talking about affordable housing more than I do, but, going out into the neighborhoods, I found that it's all well and good to describe to people what 40B is. And I think there's a lot of ignorance about that. But usually what people want to hear is okay, now tell me about this project. Now tell me what you're planning to put there. Because if you just have an open-ended, we'll go to the new library and we'll have an open-ended conversation with anybody who wants to come about affordable housing, and you'll get a few people. But if you start talking about a specific neighborhood, you'll get 90% of the neighborhood, So before we go through the exercise that we had last week again, last week or a couple of weeks ago, I'd really like to start walking down this path of educating ourselves about what the next step is, and then start checking off boxes on action items. And if we get to a point where we really can't do what we think we want to do here, which is create 55 plus affordable housing, then have that discussion when we've made that determination.
I completely agree with you, Ed, and I think that What I've done in the past and what I think that as a board we need to do, we need to reach out to, like I said, and I just happened to come from East Long Meadow, but reaching out to other towns that have a very similar demographic to us and see what they have done in the past, how they executed their affordable housing plans. You know, what were the steps that they took? And I think that's really important for us to kind of gather, you know, and I don't know, besides myself, I don't know how many people know about surrounding towns, even in central Mass, that are similar to us, you know, and so it is. And I think Brittany said it, like, about her in-laws. Shrewsbury is another town that is similar, you know, in proximity to us. You know, there's Millbury, there's Sutton, there's Marlborough. So there are plenty of towns that we can reach out to see what they have done to collect, you know, data for ourselves, to be more informed, to have a better approach, you know, because personally, off the top of my head, this is just my personal opinion, I don't think that a 55 plus is the right thing for Grafton. That's my personal. My personal is what I'm feeling, where the need seems to be is more family oriented affordable housing. And so 55 plus is not it, because now you've really limited the environment. And that's not really what we're attracting at this point. What we're attracting as a town is younger families, or families that, you know, like I said, I think when I said this, you know, to the board originally, we're attracting families that are moving out of Worcester, you know, that are like, okay, we want a better life or a better education or whatever. So we're even getting the influx of people that are moving out of Boston, you know, and they're kind of looking for these other towns. So I think that we have to just do our due diligence. We really have to do our research. That's so I agree with you, Ed. I don't know if anybody else feels about what I said, but I do agree with Ed. That would be a great first step.
All right, so Eric, you had something real quick?
Yeah, sorry, I'll try to go rapid fire. Just, Lakeisha, quick question. When you were on the trust in the Long Meadows, was the trust over there able to get any projects like funded or anything?
Yes.
Okay.
They were. And so again, and it's the same demographics, and you have like 5% of the population that comes out when you have these meetings that make 90% of the decisions. But the reality is that there was enough done, you know, in terms of research to really kind of canvassing the neighborhoods, to really meeting people where they were at. And so we had to be creative about it, you know, just sending out a survey or just saying, oh, only at town hall meetings where we're talking about this wasn't cutting it. So we got really, really creative in how we addressed people. But like I said, we were able to get things accomplished. But again, you had to listen to what the town wanted and what they needed, not just what us as a board thought they needed, you know?
Yep.
And we did reach out to other towns. You know, we did reach out to other towns, even because we border Connecticut, so even though it's a different state, just to get ideas of what they had done. So there was a lot of research that we did.
Okay. Just a couple questions I had, probably a couple for Chris, actually. I mean, what for 25 Worcester Street, like, maybe we're kind of putting the cart before the horse in that. Is there like a way for us to kind of signal, like, do people know that we have this land, like developers, do they know that we have this land and we're like, hey, we want to look at stuff? Like, is there any like advertising or solicitation type of stuff we can do? And the reason I ask that question is we do have to know what the actual viability of the land is. Like, if we get some developers to comment on it and they say, you know, I'd either have to do, you know, 60 units or like 4 houses, there's no in between. Well, okay, that narrows like what we know we can do with the property. Have you seen that anywhere, like Shrewsbury or anywhere else?
So I don't think we're actively marketing the property currently. The process for that would likely be to develop and issue a request for proposals.
Okay.
What that would do is then that we would post that out and send that in, and it would give a date for them to develop their best project and put developers to give us examples of their best project. Typically you set up a scoring criteria for that. The trust wouldn't be beholden to choose any of them. If none of the projects were amenable, they don't need to move forward with those.
Yeah.
But it does kind of start that process. And if the right project comes along, the trust would be able to move forward with that. And that also goes in line with the procurement practices as well. So.
Yeah. And how does that get like marketed though? Like if I'm a developer, how do I know that Grafton just issued this RFP for affordable housing?
Yeah, there's typically a number of kind of clearinghouse sites. The one that I'm familiar that Grafton has used for 8 Pine Street and 1727 Upton Street is called Project Dog.
Okay.
And that's a website that prospective developers typically subscribe to.
Yeah, so they'll see it pop
right.
up.
And also any of those projects, obviously, over the course of time, staff builds contacts with developers as well. So we have a list that we would just email out directly of people who have been recently active to see if they're interested.
Another excellent resource is if you look at local and some neighboring communities, their engineers and survey teams. So somebody like a Waterman or land planning, who's actually designed these projects, 100 times over. They tend to have a nice flavor of what developers are looking for and what is, what's viable in the current marketplace in a particular community. So I think, going back to Ed's point a little bit, some of my diligence as I formulated my opinions on what I feel we should do here, they came from those resources.
Got it.
So when I was tasked to approach GSX and kind of work on that, it opened up the door to a lot of different outfits that they were working with. And then some that, of course, I have worked with personally in the past. And then I looked at some of the surrounding communities and their larger projects that larger companies were participating in. And I found their brokers and I engaged them, say, hey, where are you at on a particular property? What are you getting for a price per square foot? What type of density demands do you need to make the margins you want? And where is that weird middle ground where it's the cutoff point, like you said? Well, I'm not going to do 30 there because at $250 a square foot doesn't make any sense to do 30 there.
Yeah.
So, or you go to a local developer who's going to do, 8 or 4 duplexes. You get 8 units, and that seems to be something that they'll bite at. But you're going to have to subsidize that too, because at that point, if you're 25% affordable, you're only putting 2 market units, or rather 6 market units on, and 2 are affordable. Is that the goal of the board to approach it that way with such a nice parcel of land, which with infrastructure there to support it, much larger density. So I guess I'll probably have to do a better job of articulating some of the rationale for my particular thing, just like everybody else who has a different opinion on what to do with it or what they feel they want to do with it needs to participate and bring that to us.
Yep.
So, Ed said some things, what my feeling on some of the trust issues is we spend a lot of time talking about things.
I just want to make a point there though. Ed uses the royal we for the trust, but in the last year and a half, the entire trust has turned over. So a year and a half ago, nobody here was on the trust. So I do think there is a real opportunity to actually do stuff, because from 2007 to 2020 or whatever, it wasn't any of us. So I think this group is here to make things happen.
I guess Ed and I.
Well, Ed was off for a while though. On the
The
select
common
board.
problem,
I
clearly.
was too. I suppose, I guess it starts here. We talk about it here, but then the delegation and the tasks, we have to handle it like we're getting some participation. I think it would make sense to, find, especially Keisha, because you work with another board in another community, so you probably have resources that you can tax. Brittany mentions, and I forget the name, I'm sorry, but somebody that can help
Yeah, housing forward.
housing forward that can come in and provide some. I think Jen Goldson would be a perfect person to come up with some tutorials, because she's got an immense amount of experience in projects that have gone both large and small. So we could commission her to come in and kind of give us some tutorials on what we were thinking. I just want to make sure that when we leave the talking points like we talk about tonight, that we make sure that we either set up a taskmaster to do that, and if that falls on the chairmanship, I suppose I can do that. Or if we want a subcommittee out, like we did with the GSX grant work, and then put them in their own, fact-finding mission and bring something and report something back. I will take I don't think we need to talk about this tonight. I think you bring whatever ideas you're going to have to us, of course, at the next meeting in December. But think about how we want to approach this as far as time is concerned. So if a few people have some, opportunity to spend 6 or 7 hours outside of the actual boardroom, so to speak, that can kind of chase some of those things down. Which is a good segue into GSX, because that's an opportunity for us to take a real bite at participating in a project and developing some affordable units. So just a quick update on the project itself. This is on Upton Streets. If you're not aware of it, it's basically went out for RFP, and then it's the old highway barn. So there was one participant, it was GSX, who the town was fortunate enough to take a look at this. They're the outfit that's doing Pine Street, which is the very large apartment complex that's going at the old hospital. This is a special permit process. It falls in our village mixed use overlay. So it starts out at 10% affordable, because that's what's required. And then the density is allowed. So it doesn't go through a variance process. It actually goes through the planning board process. So they have developed a fairly large project. It's now 123 units. And so at the beginning of the year, I was kind of tasked to go approach them and see how we can come up with a project that gets them to a 25% marker, which of course has a significant impact on SHI because it's apartments and they'll all count. So we have a tentative deal in place. The PNS was signed, and I sent that over to everybody. Everybody should have it. If you don't, let me know so I can get it to you with the new proposal. So we started looking at a grant program to help offset some of the soft costs for them to participate in creating another 20 affordable units inside the apartment building. So our subcommittee met last Friday in an actual open meeting. Public agenda was posted. Everything was on the up and up for everybody at home who likes to look at those things. They can view it online. We basically went through the grant program, some questions we had to provide feedback to GSX on. And I think we narrowed in on kind of what, the spend will be, and then what our basic demands are. And our basic demands are to make sure we collateralize the position in the land. So if, financing falls through on them and things of that nature and they go, we get first position on the land, which would be good for the trust to protect our funds. And also, I think we're all in consensus on the subcommittee that we're looking for something where we put $1 in, they put $1 in. So we'll go through everything and kind of fine tune it, and then we have an attorney on retainer to handle the language and getting this together. But now that we have a PNS, we can kind of start this stuff in depth, because now they're going to start looking at their investors and seeing how they're going to approach it. The PNS has them, gives them 2 years of entitlement period. That's a very long PNS, but they're going to approach HUD for some of their financing, which could take a considerable amount of time. The number we're looking at is $900K, and of course this has to come back to the trust for approval, which now that we have 7 people, I'm much more comfortable doing, so we can get everybody's buy-in. So if you have any questions, please filter them back. We don't necessarily have to go through them tonight, but filter them back through Chris or myself personally so I can get them back to the subcommittee. The subcommittee is going to meet again probably after Thanksgiving, as soon as I get a little bit more of an update. The pro forma and other pieces to it have been sent to everybody, so get familiar with it. The pro forma is very elaborate. but it has a good cost breakdown. I've done a little bit of diligence on it, bouncing it off some of the resources that I have to see if their numbers are in line with local. There are a few things, they're carrying a few costs that are a little bit higher than I think they're actually going to get bid out, but I can't, if they start in 2 years, it could be a completely different construction market for them. So I don't put too much stock in it, but it gives us a general idea where they're going to be at. It looks like we're going to get about 29 affordable units in there, give or take, that we'll add on directly from our participation, which is a good number to be at. These are mostly 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom, and it's marketed for the 55 plus community because, of course, it's a private development, and that's what they're generally going to get in there. But it does certainly look like a good prospect in a good area of town to encourage growth of new families that we want to bring into the community amongst every demographic, which of course I'm with Lakeisha on, that I want to make sure that we're open to. I don't like to restrict affordable housing, and I also, we're Grafton, so 80% of market value, even in the rental world, is still cost prohibitive to the people that we want to encourage to come out and participate in our community. So we need to have those discussions as well, which is kind of a back channel to like that next layer of complexity that we have to deal with. But this is a good project. It looks like it's going to be underway soon. They have some tentative agreements on their financing, and then the select board decided they were going to pick up the TIF and encourage the TIF committee to meet. And I just got an email about 20 minutes before we started that the TIF committee is going to reach out to John Grant, which is the principal at GSX, to start looking at the TIF negotiation.
Can you explain that a little bit more? I listened to your guys' meeting on YouTube, but so we'd be contributing approximately $900,000, and that would be going towards
Soft costs.
soft cost design fees, permitting, things like that.
Yep.
So we'd be putting in. So if they go for an engineering fee, it's $60,000. We're putting 30. They're putting 30.
Yeah, I mean it's a rough way to look at it, but yes. So I have to kind of go through. Their soft costs need to be broken down a little bit more. So they're carrying fairly large line items that are just kind of summaries, because there are certain things that we can participate in, certain things that I don't feel we should be participating in.
Because if they split, then we want to have those. If we go out for another RFP to a developer and we're trying to get designs from them, then we can use those engineering. Is that the idea?
So that's something that we have to negotiate with them. So we have to negotiate with them how they go out and bid. So if they're gonna have most of their stuff in house, they're a large enough outfit that most of it.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, it looks like they have an architect and.
They do.
Right. So yeah, I
So are
agree.
we
We definitely
paying
need
them for?
bigger line. We need more specifics on the line items, like on what we're paying for and what we get. What are we privy to once we pay, for certain things.
Yeah.
I think that's a definitely that 900 is a big enough number that we really need to make sure what are we getting out of things because we're getting approximately 29 affordable housing out of 123. But we need to know what we can use. Like, so if we've paid this much money, what of the plans, like Brittany said, what can we use, after this?
The subcommittee is tasked with kind of doing that diligence. So when we have something a little bit more solid, hopefully over the next month, we'll bring it back to the trust and we'll go through and outline everything and then, solicit some feedback into what we put together. There's going to be a lot of kind of hands-on relationship with them. But from a perspective of what we're allowed to spend money on, because of course we have 2 buckets of funds. We have CPA dollars that came in through the statutory required reserves that come in every year, and we also have a settlement that's been sitting there for about 10 years, which is far less restrictive. So we want to make sure we balance that out, and then when we get involved in a grant program that's going to be in a development that's over 3 to 5 years, we also need to consider that this project may outlive a lot of the members that are on the trust or their tenure on the trust. So we need to make sure everything's very, very well documented and make sure we have an administration program that can handle it if we end up turning over 4 or 5 members like we did this year and continue on, because that's part of our good faith with dealing with an outfit like GSX is that, we have 2-year terms. So, they're probably far more comfortable than that when we finally have a full body, but we turned over 5 members this year. So in 2 years, we're going to turn over another 5 members and we could have a completely different platform. So we need to make sure that not only are we looking at what we can and cannot spend money on and make sure we're spending it wisely, but also making sure we can keep the program alive during the lifespan of it.
And
So-
something I just want to, oh, sorry, Brittany.
No, it's okay. You can go ahead.
Something else I just want to bring up, that looking at this project, we also have to use this to compare to the 25 Worcester Street, because if we're doing this as a 55 up collaboration with GSX, do we need then to have another property that's also targeting the same market? That's not effective. I don't think that that's effective for Grafton as a whole.
And
So I think
Upton
we
Street's all ages.
It's just
Upton Street.
just the marketing. They're gonna market to 55 plus, but there's no restriction. I mean, if you're 18, you could buy there.
Okay,
Yeah, if you look at the last,
because I was a little concerned.
yeah,
Because that was concerning, because if we're
Yeah.
marked, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're like
Messaging,
55 plus, the messaging. And so again, we also have to be careful with the messaging, because again, that's saying, oh, we don't want younger people in Grafton, 55 up. And you have to, even though it's open to all ages, if we're marketing it as a 55 up, we have to make sure that our next property is not marketing that way, that it's marketed completely different, or else we're going to look like that's all we want,
Yeah,
even if we are open to everyone.
I think the I'm newer to this stuff, but what I've heard is that the marketing, that kind of marketing, is typically effective, and they end up with mostly 55 plus people living there. So I think saying they're just going to market it to 55 plus, if it's true that that works, then I think that's not something to just wave away. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I would counter to that in that that's the only bird we have in the hand right now. That's it. And that is unfortunate, because the past work of the trust has not yielded other properties where we could actually do an analysis and comparison. But that's what we have. And I think, just my opinion on, how we spend the money here, I'm really just looking at it purely like ROI. How many affordable units are we getting for the money that we're investing in the project? And I did the math, GSX, them agreeing to go from 10 to 25 yields 18 additional units affordable that we would not have gotten if we don't pitch in money. And that's $50K a unit. To me, that's a pretty good investment, because if you look at a duplex or a couple duplexes, the amount of money that the trust would have to give to a developer to get them to make those affordable is likely even higher than 50K, and it's less units. So I hear what everybody's saying, but I think we kind of need a win here at some point.
Oh,
So,
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that going forward for
Yeah.
the next project, that we have to be careful not to market it this in the same exact way. That's all I'm saying, is to be mindful of this project is a great opportunity. Yes, we need to get something done. Yes, it makes perfect dollar sense for, the return. But the point is, going forward for our next project, and where we need to detail this out in our notes for the board to come, or going, down the line, is that we need to be very specific that, okay, this is what this project is being marketed as. This is what we're attracting. This is what they've attracted in the past by this type of marketing. But for our next project, we need to make it very clear that we are going to be open to all, that we are not going to make it age specific. So therefore, we don't look exclusive and we look inclusive, because if not, then we're not attracting and then we're looked at as this kind of stuck in the mud board that is like, oh, they only care about a certain, they only care about, the over 55 couple with, just a couple. They're not looking to attract families into Grafton. So we have to be careful about what we do going forward.
Yep.
So this is, like I said, this is great. This is a great groundbreaker for us, but we just have to be really mindful in our next steps. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I totally agree. No, good, great
I
point.
completely agree with Lakeisha. And, I guess the question I have, and maybe it's a very simple question from a simple person, but why does GSX care? Why bother marketing to 55 and older? What's their angle? You would think it would just be like, they're interested in the population that's looking for homes.
No, because that's what they sell to. That's what has given them the biggest profit.
Is that what they're doing at Pine?
Well, I mean, it's
So no, and I want to be careful. I can't speak for GSX and their motivations for marketing that way. I think there are some regional, frankly, national trends and demographics where
Baby
the
boomers.
retirement age community, the over 55. Some people don't like the term, so I apologize, but they call it the silver tsunami. But when you map the trends, and so I apologize,
Yeah.
but when you map the trends, it is a large wave, essentially the baby boomer generation.
No, yeah, it's true. We're targeting that in architecture
Yeah,
constantly
and
right
so
now.
it's actually projected to be a growing concern of providing housing for that generation as that population grows, and having the housing set up, because obviously the allowing for the aging in place, the requirements for that type of housing are separate from other age demographics, and so that may be part of what that was related to. There's other, the over 55, when we talk about affordable housing and SHI, there is some affordable over 55 restrictions, which would actually be deed restricted. What that does is it's actually, it doesn't mean that you can't live in there if you're under 55, but it's one of the members of the household has to be over 55. So for example, you could have a regular family that has a grandparent or recently retired parent that
Husband or wife.
right.
there's a lot of that came out of DHCD that kind of tailored to that because it's a growing population of grandparents that are handling child rearing again in particular situations. So the a lot of your deed restrictions and kind of the segregation of basically your communities, so the 55 plus stuff, you can only have 55 in there and you can't let anybody else in, or you're only exclusively providing for veterans, which all may be good and noble causes, but it doesn't necessarily relieve the housing crisis for the larger percentage of the population. And certainly in Grafton, there's no evidence to support that we need 55 plus housing more than we need any other type of housing. I just want the one caveat to GSX is I know it's marketed that way, and you can't really throw a stone around Shrewsbury, Marlboro, Grafton without hitting a large development. It seems to be what everybody's doing, so to speak. I don't know, Silver Snow, I actually didn't hear that, but that's a good way to put it. But they're just basically amenities rich, small units with a lot of support staff for them. Pools, workout centers, things of that nature. But just keep in mind that if we're tackling the housing crisis, one town at a time, so to speak, they're going to attract a lot of people in those 1,500 square foot single family homes we have around town or whatever, into downsize into an apartment complex, and that's going to hopefully allow some inventory to open up to new families to come in town and live in those houses that are people are moving out of. Now I know there's not a lot of empirical evidence to support how that would have affect Grafton itself, But if we're looking at, the Commonwealth as a whole, I know Ed, you mentioned it when we were talking the last time, is, finding places for people to get out of that, live in place situation that frees up that inventory for other people to move in. And that helps as well.
But it doesn't help because I'm just being playing the devil's advocate right now. It doesn't help because the prices are so high. So you have a market where, okay, I'm 55, I'm going to sell my 3-bedroom home, but now where had this been 3 years ago, I would have sold it for 300,000. The market is crazy. So now I can sell it for 700,000. And now I take couple A who wants to move into Grafton, they can't afford it because now it's not affordable. So yeah, we have these people that have wanting to move out into this 55 older because they want to downsize, but it's really not going to necessarily create more available housing, affordable housing, because people still can't, unless we create affordable housing, the housing market isn't allowing for affordable housing. You get what I'm saying? As a whole.
I understand completely.
So I was just
Our
being,
mission
I was
is
just playing devil's advocate. So
I would say our mission, it is to create affordable housing units. It's an offset to just the greater housing crisis and the inventory, or the lack of inventory, which tends to drive prices in an alarming direction. But I just want to make sure that we're on board with GSX. If you have any questions, and then the subcommittee will provide something that we can, with a lot of, data, and we'll have to spend some time on it here, to kind of go through everything and get comfortable with it. But our timeline on this is, we want it done before January.
So Bruce, if I can, before we get off GSX, I had just one observation and then a question. If it is true that Upton Street and Pine Street both are going to be marketed toward 55 and older communities, I think that I would probably want to amend what I said about 25 Worcester Street a moment ago. That does become a valid reason, I think, at some point to go back to the town and say, look, the situation changed since we were deeded 25 Worcester Street. We've now got 2 developments that are, if not entirely, but primarily occupied by the very populace that we were serving to protect. So would you consider doing something slightly different here? And along the lines of what Matt was saying, is just remove that 55 plus restriction on it. That I think that's a longer term conversation because there's a lot of balls in the air right now.
Yeah.
But that rolled through my head. And on the issue of the TIF, has council had a chance to weigh in on that at all, Bruce?
In
Can you actually explain that a little bit? Because I had a couple questions on
Sure.
it.
Let me go through. Eric, he had something real quick, and I just want to make sure it's not on the same, thread.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I actually lost my train.
So who's counsel? Kramer or
Our council,
Mars?
yeah.
As far as a TIF for this particular site?
Yeah, so here's my question still remains, and it's the same question I had during the subcommittee meeting. Is I've never heard of a residential developer getting a TIF, and I don't know if Lakeisha or Brittany, you've heard of that either. I did a little bit of research, and what I found was that DHCD has a program called Urban Center Housing Tax Increment Financing, and what that program does is it allows you, the residential developer, to apply for a TIF, but DHCD puts certain requirements on that. And among them, and I'll forward this link to you guys, there are eligible applicants that you can have. But long story short, the project would have to be near a town center, which luckily we are. But you also have to adopt a detailed urban center housing tax increment plan for the designated area and have that designated area recognized by DHCD as something that you can do here. So it seems like if this program exists, the Urban Center Housing Tax Increment Financing Program, that says to me that just they may not allow, without permission and without application, a housing trust to even grant a TIF, or a municipality to even grant a TIF without DHCD signing off on it. So maybe before we get too far down that road, council should weigh in.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say that all we can do is get the TIF committee started on the project, and it's up to them because it's their charge. They're the authority in town. It's how everything's kind of set up. So let the three of them come up with the questions they need to come up with, and then we'll provide them as much of this information as possible so they don't, get to town meeting and have a pitfall.
I just, I don't know what Marcia Platt, Ramey, and whoever else is on that committee really knows about, because we don't even know about
So-
affordable housing residential development TIFs. They could go and approve it, and all of a sudden we're at town meeting and it comes back and, oh, you can't do that. I mean, I think it behooves us to sort of reach out to council.
That is a possibility, and I will pass along that recommendation. You have your select board rep here, so they can pass along those concerns.
Yep.
Which is why we have one. So,
Remember,
is
things
a-
change every day.
Right.
Every day with the HCD
Right.
because of the pandemic, things change literally almost every day. So, you
I
like,
was under the
something might
impression
be-
that the rules for municipal TIFs, although they can have other exceptions to them for particular styles of development, that depended on what type of financing the Commonwealth was providing that particular developer or development. But I could be wrong, and we just now started to broach the subject, so we'll make sure that we just pass along the information. I did tell Evan that, we wanted to participate from a trust perspective because, as far as skin in the game is concerned, if we're gonna pony up 900,000 to try to get as many units out of this as possible, we wanna make sure the project gets realized. So if there isn't a TIF there and we have to negotiate a different scenario, we need to make sure we're all team players in this because the town has a $1 million payday coming to it when this thing gets built. So $650 to the land, plenty of permitting fees. We want to see them go from 10% to 25%. The town wants to see them to go to 25% because they're going to get 123 units against SHI, which coupled with Pine Street is going to put you at your 10% threshold. So it's behoove of the town to do this. But Ed, like and you've seen, sometimes it's very difficult to get all the parties communicating and moving forward in the right direction and in step. So that is one of the things I said to the select board when we were there. So I think they're going to let us participate in this process. At least I hope so, and provide them with this type of feedback to make sure we're trying to cover every angle. Because we want to see the TIF go through because we're committing 900K to the project. We have some recovery period for our money, so that's okay. But we want to make sure that it doesn't get waylaid at any particular point in this process, because they're going to want to know our commitment to it too. And of course, we're a separate municipality, so we kind of do our own thing. But for this particular thing, it's a true partnership. So.
Sorry, I remembered what I was going to say earlier. It is the grant. Is that with our council now? Do we have to vote on it to start paying them to draw that together? Where is that?
So I didn't want to start paying them until we ironed out some of those questions I had for GSX and make sure that they're willing to do the 1-to-1 and things of that
Okay.
nature, because that's going to have to be spelled out.
We're just talking high level right
I
now.
didn't want to do a back and forth.
Yep.
Legal expenses, can rack up pretty quickly.
Yep.
So I figured we'd get enough
Okay.
packaged up. Matt, you had something?
Yeah, just quickly on the whole TIF and the trust involvement. I would imagine that, obviously the TIF committee are going to be drawing that up, framing it out, and doing the actual negotiations. I wouldn't imagine the trust being at the table, but certainly we'd expect input and requirements and maybe review from the trust as far as the actual TIF goes.
I mean, from my immediate perspective, I don't, if we're the trust and I'm representing the trust in any particular role, or any of us are representing it, we need to make sure we protect our capital.
Of course.
So
Yeah, I think that what Bruce is saying is the trust is going to want to see what our perception of the viability of the TIF is. If it's something ridiculous, we're not going to stand in front of town meeting and get shot bullet holes in us,
Yeah,
whereas
we'll
if
have to-
it's and that's fine, the TIF committee can do their thing, but if a product that is not sellable comes out, it's going to be an issue.
Sure.
Okay, so just Brittany, from perspective on the TIF,
Yeah, can you just explain in layman's terms what they're getting out of it? Are they getting like a tax break essentially every year, or?
That's essentially what it is.
Okay.
They can go anywhere from I think 3 to like 20 years or something to that extent.
Yeah,
And,
so over time, they're essentially,
It's incremental. Yeah, Chris, if you
They're-
want to fill in,
So it's a little bit more complicated, but the quick and dirty way to explain it is that it's a tax increment each year. So when the project gets built, obviously the taxes, the land value goes up. The taxes that they generally would pay go up as well. What happens is in a tax increment financing, the taxes are not assessed in that first year while they're under construction. Usually it's a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year TIF where they define that, and over those years their taxes go up incrementally, and what that does is it alleviates the tax burden on them in the initial years, and then they eventually ramp up to the full tax amount.
so
that
would
they
you
normally-
limit them to the price they can raise the rent to that same percentage?
so those are the questions that we are kicking back to GSX now, because in their pro
Yeah.
forma, they're taxing individual units. We want to make sure that if that's a net that they're trying to recover, that it's not part of the TIF negotiation, which is kind of part of that nuance of why we want to
Yeah.
make sure that we're in the room, where it happens,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Because I mean, this kind of housing is not your typical Section 8 affordable housing. This is not a cheap rent still. It's still a decent rent they're getting. And I assume they're going up for that HUD financing. Do you know what percentage of affordable units they have to go out for that? Is it the 10% or do they need more?
Well, we're asking that the only reason why they would go HUD is if they were doing 25%. So the
So they're
deal,
getting that. So they're getting that incentive as well.
Yeah,
So
well,
they're
I'm-
getting 3 incentives, basically,
that
right?
is correct. Yes.
That's a lot of incentive. I mean,
But on the flip side of that, we're getting a lot of houses for it. So,
yeah.
and from a town's perspective, you're taking a dirty old barn that's no longer in use and getting somebody to build something on it who was the only one that responded to an RFP.
I kind of like that barn.
Wait, which barn? There's two. The white one
The
is
dairy
actually,
barn.
Okay, that actually has the potential to stay. So it's the sheet metal one that's going to come down. So
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, I just would like to see the numbers, I think, fleshed out. I guess you sent the pro forma out, and that has all that detail in there.
it does, but it doesn't have. That's what they're doing for kind of their basic model. Now they told me specifically that the original proposal that they had is altered some at the 10%. If we don't do any of this, they're still going to build what they wanted to build. So they would still do 123 units and have 12 of them be affordable under their current plans. And that's what they're allowed to do by right in town. They got to go through the normal channels that everybody else would have to. But they have financing in place to do that. What we're asking them to do is alter that to get some more units and provide the incentive. So if they do want a TIF and it's reasonable, I think what the argument would be, and what it's been demonstrated to me, not in writing so far, because what we got in the pro forma doesn't quite spell that out. It still has them carrying nets for individual units. So there's a lot more that we have to kind of uncover. But essentially, they want an offset for the rent loss while they're in their ramp up phases. So if this gets built in 3 years, their capacity, they're going to want to be at 80% or whatever metric they're using to hit their numbers. So they're probably going to be looking for a TIF to operate for their operational expenses for some amount of time, and I think that's what they're looking for. So that additional 15 or 18 units or something like that we're adding to it that they're going to get 200 or 300 less a month for. They want to be able to offset that cost on the operational side. So whether we do that or not, I don't know. But it's, from our perspective, let's at least get in the room and start hashing all this stuff out. So I know that we don't want to see them get away with something, and which I don't know if that's the vein of thought you were under, Brittany. That there's
No, I'm
I'm
trying to understand because I've never done a TIF before in this kind of a project, so I'm just trying to understand the logic behind it. I know what HUD financing is. I understand trying to help them with the soft cost because it's an upfront cost. I'm just trying to, I mean, we're trying to make, it seems like the town is trying to benefit from this. So, I mean, I'd just be curious how long that tip's going to last and what it will be
Well, you'll
over
get to
the
vote on
years.
it because it has to go to town
Okay.
meeting. So that's like the next step. So the select board gives authorization for a few members of the community, one being from the select board, to represent the select board in a negotiation for what it looks like. Chris
Gotcha.
gave you some of the kind of skeleton to it. There's a lot of rules in place, the underlying land, you can't get a TIF for that. There's all sorts of stuff kind of baked into it.
Yeah.
We've had a couple, they've all been commercial, some small commercial, some very large commercial. But there's nothing that restricts them from doing it for a project like this, unless there's something that they can't find, which, as Ed brought up, we need to make sure that they're looking down those rabbit holes to make sure.
Can we
that-
negotiate with them to help with some of the infrastructure, sidewalks, and all that stuff?
Well, that's gonna be part of the
The
special
center,
permit
yeah.
vetting process. So, as they go through the planning board, screening, buffering, sidewalks and things like that, the overlay district that they're in, I think the town has done a very good job of kind of covering those things in the bylaw itself to make sure it's a walkable place. I mean, you got the new library up there and you got the common, a lot of those things need to be tied in, and our bylaw already accounts for those type of things.
Okay. Yeah,
Right.
besides that, I mean, I had some comments on their unit layouts, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I want to get into the weeds with them, doing
No,
what
I
they're
know, I'm
doing.
joking, but
Because they're carrying some costs in there that I are a little bit alarming
not
to
very
me.
efficient layouts, but that's fine.
But I'm not going to tell them their business. I mean, this is what they do.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of strictly speaking from a town's perspective and what we're going to get out of it. So,
Gotcha.
and yeah, I think if you look at this from a broad perspective, especially from the outside looking in, well, oh geez, they're getting property for $650K in a place that the town is exclusively set up for them to get density that they can actually make a lot of money on. Oh, and
Yeah.
they're getting $900K from the trust. Oh, and they're looking for a TIF, which could amount to a couple $1 million in savings over the course of 15 years. And
Yeah.
somebody's going to say, oh boy, when they
Yeah, I
really
mean, in
made up.
Boston, when you go through this kind of a project, they just gift you the land and that's it. You're on your own, right? So it's just different for me. But there's a lot more interest in Boston, so it's a different market there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, just a perspective,
Yep.
So they're gonna get theirs. They're gonna make their money as long as everybody's their eyes wide open for that, and we just strictly look at what our prize is. And our prize, as a community perspective, is a lot of units, a lot of win for the Affordable Housing Trust as far as affordability is concerned, and we're still gonna get a betterment to a site that, if we let go, would be just like every other town-owned property that we've seen, including 25 Worcester Street, which has sat dormant for 60-something years, and nobody's done anything with it. Or Millbury Street, the Hudson Ave thing, which we were looking at, which was deeded to the cemetery department in the 60s. And that's all land that should have been and could have been used for these type of projects and didn't because nobody did it. So we're going to be the ones doing it. And in a lot of ways, it's going to make us, the bad guys. I mean, Brittany, you saw that meeting. That was a tough spot to be in. That was a tough meeting to show up to the first one. Lakeisha, you should probably watch that one. It's a really good one.
But I mean, if you have your facts, I mean, that's
I will.
facts, right? So
Yeah, facts mean something to most people, but facts don't mean a lot to a lot of people. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
if when we have these charrettes and we have these discussions, typically what you'll find is the people that are directly impacted by what you're talking about. And that doesn't sit well with me because you never get a true cross section. So, I mean, I've been doing this for almost 18 years, starting with the planning board and things of that nature. And I can count on like one hand a person who showed up to an actual public hearing and said something good about something. Oh, this is going to bring jobs in. Oh, that's great. I want a job. Maybe 5 in probably 100 different public hearings. What you get traditionally is a bunch of people who don't want to see what you want to get done. And it's as an instrument of change and progression for what we're trying to do. on this trust and what our mission is, you know, we need to make sure we navigate that, and the traditional approaches may not be the best approaches. We're going to do what we're supposed to do and we have to do. At a certain point, we're going to have to make a decision for what we want to do and say, this is why it's good, this is what we're doing, and we're going to have to get past the 30 people in the room who don't want us to do that. And that takes a little bit, and I think you guys are all right. The more facts we have, the more confidence we have, and the more we have the ability to sell it beyond the people that just don't want to see anything happen. So I agree with everybody there. Now it's just a matter of kind of coming up with those ideas of how we actually do that. But I know, for one, it's not in this, you know, meeting that we're having right now. It's going to take place out of that. It's going to be in smaller subgroups. It's going to be individual members here taking it upon themselves to say, oh, all right, well, I'm going to go chase that down. And I'm going to spend a few hours out of this meeting space, and I'm going to report back to the trust what I found. Whether it's finding consultants, finding contractors, finding people who have some experience in this, and then bringing them into us. So we have to move on to Dan's comment, because
Just a quick one. So I watched the subcommittee meeting. If I heard correctly, they are slightly decreasing their total number of units, which slightly decreases the affordable ones. I just wanted to make sure that we're keeping in mind if there's a possibility that the number might go back up in a couple years if things are better about, you know, lumber prices or whatever, that we're still getting a 25%. We're not getting, you know, X
There's like an
absolute number of
escalation.
units.
Yeah.
no,
Right.
I think what's going to happen here. Okay, go ahead, Chris. They're going to be locked into the permit process.
Right, and that's, I would say, the numbers can fluctuate a little bit. You know, obviously we'll want them to stay somewhat in line with the proposal from their RFP. The actual numbers can fluctuate during the permitting process, but that, once that is, if it's approved, which I would imagine at this point, that would be a locked-in number, and they would have, I mean, they could change it, but then they'd have to go back through the process, so that's when that would
Okay,
be narrowed down.
So I just want to make sure that what we are actually agreeing to with them, the actual, you know, legally enforceable wording is that we will get 25% of them affordable.
Well, I think from protecting us and our interests is if we're approaching this from like the, you know, we have 900K, we're going to commit to this. Our expectation is a certain amount of affordable units, and it might not be 25%. It might be if they reduce their unit count to 110, that we are still getting our amount of units that requested when we requested them at 25, and we can certainly, you know, put language in our contract with them for that.
Did
So
they say which type of units is affordable?
That's another thing that we're going to have to negotiate.
Because if it's the ones with the bedrooms that have no windows, I mean,
So they are required when they're restricted to be like all other units and mixed in terms of which location and style. So
Because otherwise it would be that. It would be
Yeah.
the least
Not
desirable
equal.
unit. would be-
You get the Harry Potter closet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dobby.
I have had developers ask if they could put a very small house and then
Yeah.
the larger subdivisions, and it's no,
Yes.
absolutely not.
We're not going to relieve them of any of the restrictions that they're statutorily required to do. You know, unit count and things like that, I think we can participate in. If we want to see 29 units there, we pay for 29 units, we get 29 units, whether they're at 100 count or not. So, they did also remove the parking garage from underneath. So that's also on there, which is significant. It may play a role in the planning board process, but I doubt it. It looks like that's, you know, what they're doing is going to be conforming. So, and also if we're doing dollar for dollar as we approach, you know, wetlands delineations and going to Concom and getting order conditions and things of that nature, there's going to be some points where we won't have committed all that capital to a whole bunch of various things that might not move forward because they can't get through Concom. So I'll make sure that that's also part of the discussion, that they get permit X, Y, and Z before they start spending money on architectural renderings and things of that nature, that they know that they can actually do this here and they're not going into somebody's buffer zone, you know, at the 25-foot setback or something that they can't do. So we'll make sure, and I think we have enough expertise on this trust to make sure we can navigate those. So, the very first rule we should do is make sure we protect our investment. So that's what any other developer or any other money lender would do. So we need to treat it like that. Okay, briefly for administrative assistant update, we do not have one. We cannot find one, and we're going back to the drawing board. I spoke with Mark Haddad today. Mark Haddad is our finance committee chair. I think you guys talked about it last night. So we're kind of in a joint venture with them. They have Sue Fiacco, the longtime assistant for FinCom, is leaving. We were looking to add on an assistant that can help with clerical work and things, minutes and, the functional stuff of the trust. And we can't seem to find one. So Krista, who is our HR rep from the municipal side, is going to be back in a couple weeks. We'll sit down again and see if we can, adjust the position a little bit, the hours, the wage, and see if we can find something better. So I think, we shouldn't overanalyze it. I don't think we're going to replace Sue Fiacco. I don't think you can in this day and age. I think we just need to find a warm body and mentor them into what we need to get done. Because, it's been 6 months now that we've been trying to find this position. Let's go out, maybe we need to pay a little bit more, and let's get somebody in there so we can have that basic core requirement we need for handling like bill paying and, all the stuff that we need to maintain. So I wanted to add that because it's been a while. So if anybody has any insight too, we don't mean to kind of hash it out tonight because it's a voting type of thing. Just send me an email if you have an idea of what you want to change. But we use job descriptions from other communities for their trusts assistants and who handled their affordable housing. So we added that stuff to it. So we know what we're looking for. It's just we can't seem to find a candidate that actually wants the job. So we'll go back and take another look at it. The other thing we don't have on here is something that Matt had brought up, and it's basically the, along the same vein as hiring an assistant, but handling our web presence, Facebook messaging, and some of the marketing stuff. So I'll let you just briefly go over it, and then we'll table it till the next meeting.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to bring up the idea along the lines of a couple of other members have brought up more general public engagement initiatives. I've seen a pretty good amount of success, for example, with the Land Trust just having their own page on Facebook. I think that's something that we should have. And again, it's just a place where we can start building that community support and finding the people that will come out to the meetings and support us, will come to town meeting and support our initiatives. Not necessarily focused on any particular property, but talk about affordable housing in general, but from the trust perspective to establish us as an institution and with a perspective on what it is that we want to do, why it's important, to start educating people more generally around affordable housing and what it is that we do. So the Land Trust does a good job of that. So I think a Facebook page would be a good idea. And I'd also like to partner with the town a little bit to get, if possible, a little bit of autonomy around what's on our part of the town webpage, and even consider getting our own webpage. So just getting all of those modes of, informational feeds out to the community. Because it just doesn't really exist right now. We have our meetings and they're, fine. But there just isn't a lot of awareness about what the Housing Trust does in Grafton and what affordable housing generally is all about. So I'd just like to see something happen in that regard. So.
I don't wanna have
Basically,
too
our
much-
webpage. I mean, what some other towns have done too is not just Facebook, like Twitter feeds. So Twitter, IG, Facebook, because again, we are a very social day and age where everybody wants the fast feed. But I definitely agree with you, and I think that our mission statement, would definitely be, a great thing to be displayed. our specific mission statement, and then also, informative information about what affordable housing is in general.
Yeah, and we have a lot going on. So to just update the community on what it is that the trust is actually getting done, I think would be really useful too. Because otherwise, we're just here in a meeting room talking about stuff. I have the sense that we're going to be, accomplishing some real goals over the next couple of years. And to establish that sense of credibility and trust within the community, I think some of that's going to take some outreach. It is going to take some, I forget who was it that said earlier, people need to be heard. There's a big element of that, but also demonstrating the progress that the trust is making is going to be really important.
So I will put this on the next agenda item, now that you've got a kind of a tidbit of what you want. If you have any other ideas that you want to participate in this, I'll give it its own, so we can have an actionable item where we can go out and say, we want to adjust the job description, we want to hire somebody to do this, and we can kind of play at those type of things. So, Dan, you had something real
okay.
quick? Perfect. All right.
Bruce's favorite comment. Never mind.
So, all right. So, if you have any other questions, or if you haven't picked up the housing production plan yet, make sure you grab it. There is a lot of it's a wealth of information as far as what we did a couple years ago when we had that done. Of course, it's something that they can constantly update, but it's new enough, it's relevant enough. There's a couple projects that are coming online that aren't in there. We did have some correspondence from Bill Yeomans on the ZBA. We're going to push that one off into the next meeting. As far as our total SHI and what we are, and what projects have come online that need to be reported, and how we report them, which has a concern for our safe harbor, which of course is relevant to the ZBA because they hear these type of variance requests often enough. So that's all we got for tonight. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, and we have to do this by roll call, so we'll start with some of the panelists. Lakeisha? Just to vote on
okay.
adjournment.
Close. What did
Brittany?
you say?
Just an aye. is
Aye.
fine. Ed?
Frisbee, aye.
Eric?
Swenson, aye.
Matt?
Off tonight.
Daniel?
Kosher, aye.
And she's it up tonight. Bruce, aye. We're out.